Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you to the webinar, Engaging ELLs in Authentic Online Language Instruction. My name is Sydney Snyder. And just to share a little bit about me, I am a principal associate with SupportEd. I've been working at SupportEd for about 9 years now. We're a small consulting firm based out of the DC area focused on educational equity and advocacy for English learners and their families. And prior to that, I was an ESOL teacher for many years, most recently in the Northern Virginia area. I currently live in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I want to begin by saying thank you to all of you for the work that you have done over the past couple months in my work with teachers, and also as a parent of a fourth and a first grader. I've been so impressed with teachers' creativity and resiliency and support for students and their families as we tried to continue their learning from home. So thank you so much. You've put in so much time and effort for that, and we really appreciate all that you've done. Just before we get started, I want to make sure that you're aware of a few of the features in Zoom. I'm sure by now many of you are very familiar with Zoom, but in case you aren't, please take a minute to find your control bar, and you'll see there are some different options there. We ask that if you have any content-related questions, you can ask those through the Q&A button, and I'll be responding to questions at the end of the webinar. If you're having any technical issues, please respond in the chat, and my colleague Kate Monick is here with me today. She will be responding to technical questions, and she'll also be posting links throughout the webinar. We'll also be using the chat feature to take part in a couple of reflection activities or discussion activities. So again, in the chat setting, make sure that you've clicked on all panelists and attendees. The default is all panelists, which means that only Kate and I will be able to see those, but we'd love for you to share your ideas and your thoughts with everyone. And I also wanted to let you know that anything that's coming from us, from Kate, will have 3 asterisks in front of it, and those will be the links that we'll be sharing or any other resources. So you can look out for those. At this time, as I see many of you have already done, please take a minute to introduce yourself. Please share your full name and your district. And you need to do this in order to get the CTLE credit for this webinar. So we'll be sharing the chat with Long Island RBERN, and they will be distributing the CTLE credits or certificates based on people who have entered their name in the chat. So please be sure to do that. I also wanted to point out an icon in the bottom right-hand corner. You see chat. Anytime you see that, we'll be having some kind of discussion or some kind of activity, and that will be your cue to respond in the chat. Again, you will be granted a CTLE credit through My Learning Plan, and in order to receive that, you need to put in your name and your district into the chat. Thank you so much. So our objectives for today are to explore the importance of integrating language instruction into content learning, learn and apply strategies and tools that support ELLs in learning the domains of listening, speaking, reading, writing, and viewing during online learning, and reflect on how you might integrate these instructional strategies in your context. I want to share with you a Padlet of resources that we've put together. So we're doing a series of 4 webinars for Long Island. So this Padlet includes all of those resources for all 4. And you'll see here with the yellow highlighted box, these is the resources for today. I have also saved the PowerPoint in that column. So if you're interested in looking at the PowerPoint, you'll be able to go there to find it. And we are also making a recording of the webinar, so we will be sharing that with the RBERN. I also wanted to point out the 5th column on this Padlet, and this is a link to Padlet that we've put together specifically related to teaching ELLs online. So there's a lot there. We've been gathering it over the last couple months, So I encourage you to check out that one as well. And I wanted to point out, again, we have an icon. Anytime we've shared a resource on the Padlet, you'll see this icon of the crane in the bottom right-hand corner. And it is case sensitive, but you'll see it's LI for ELLs is the link to that Padlet. So we know that there are many challenges related to teaching ELLs virtually or remotely, such as access to technology, other conflicting obligations that students might have, connection to Wi-Fi, and just the fact that you've had to change your whole teaching model very suddenly. But as we think about moving into the next year and the uncertainty of what that's going to look like, I also want us to take a minute to think about some of the opportunities that have come from remote learning. And I'm going to share a couple, then I'd love to hear what other ideas you have from opportunities that have come through this experience. So we know that certain students who might have school-based anxiety, or students who are shy, this has been an opportunity for them to learn in different ways. And I've heard stories of teachers telling me that some students who were very shy are now speaking up more when they're doing when they're working in small groups or having virtual meetings. This is also an opportunity for students, our ELLs, to develop their home language. They're home with families, so they can really take that opportunity to speak and learn in their home language. It's an opportunity for writing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the webinar, but I think often we feel that it's very hard to have enough time for students to really spend time on their writing, but now there's more of a gift of time, so students who need longer can take longer to do that writing. There's an opportunity for repeating recorded directions and lessons. So I found that even with my first grader, her teacher would record a lesson and she would watch it, and then she'd be working on the activity and she would say, I need to go back and watch a certain piece of that to hear what she said again. So we know, like, if it's benefiting, non-ELLs, it can be really beneficial for our ELLs, right, to hear that repeated language. It allows for student choice. It allows for small group instruction, so teachers meeting with small groups for very targeted instruction, and it's building independence and time management. Just to share some of the things that you've shared, more time and help from older siblings, right? So we're seeing older siblings taking on more responsibility for helping and having that support. More individualized instruction. They take time on their instruction, right? We know it's challenging in a classroom because we have those students that are finishing quickly, those that are taking longer. So it can be a time for students to really work at their own pace. Nice. Involving parents as partners. Yeah, I think that's been a huge, huge piece of it. So opportunities to connect with families. Opportunities to connect with students and their families with wellness calls. So that brings up that really important social emotional piece, which I think is so critical when we're talking about distance learning. Technology is challenging. I'll give you that. That is very true. And I'm also hearing that people, both students and teachers and parents, we've all learned a lot about technology, I think, in the last couple of months. The opportunity for individual feedback. Nice, thank you. All right, please feel free to keep adding your ideas, and I'm gonna keep moving along. So we're gonna start talking about the importance of integrating language instruction into content learning. So why is this so important? And I'm just gonna provide an overview of some of the research, what we know. And this is taken from a synthesis of research on teaching ELLs that Diane August did, and this is shared on the Padlet. So she speaks to the critical need to provide students with access to grade level content. So we know our ELLs need access to that content that's at grade level, but we need to provide supports in order for them to be able to do that. And this can look different depending on the age level. And we need to provide them with both visual supports, such as pictures, videos, graphic organizers, diagrams, tables, concept maps, and verbal support. So student glossaries, words glossed in context, academic discussions focused on key ideas, bilingual glossaries, sentence and paragraph frames. And again, these have been grouped by elementary or secondary, but some are good for both levels. We also know, based on synthesis of both Diane August research and research out of the Institute of Education Science, that we need to develop ELLs academic language, that's really critical for them engaging with the content. We need to integrate oral language into instruction. We need to provide structured opportunities to develop students' language skills, and we need to capitalize on students' home language, their knowledge, and cultural assets. Specifically related to oral language, we're going to be talking a lot about that. Zweers and Crawford talk about the importance of giving students the opportunity to hear and practice discipline-specific language. And that repetition of language and vocabulary that comes through those discussions can be really powerful for our ELLs in terms of learning content, developing language, and even building literacy skills. We also know that it helps to enhance learning and retention of content. So when students are talking about it, it's helping them learn. And then there's additional benefits such as problem solving, building sense of community, and opportunities to discuss differing perspectives. So all those are benefits of these oral discussions. Next, we're going to dive right into the tools and strategies to support online language development during online learning. And we're going to start with some speaking and listening. And at this time, what I'd like to do is I'd like you to take a poll, and I'm going to ask you to answer, how much time do ELLs spend engaged in academic conversation during face-to-face learning? So let me see. I've started it now, and so if you can just answer, it should pop up on your screen. 0 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 21, 21 to 50, or 50 or more. We'll just take a couple minutes to do this. So again, this is academic conversation, students talking to one another, as opposed to doing reading or writing or having the teacher speak to them. What do you think? So I see we're almost there. There's 191 of you on today, and about 158, 59 of you have completed the poll. We'll take just another couple seconds. I see some of you are answering in the chat. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So it was really split with 34% of you saying between 6 and 10%. Followed by 11 to 21, 21 to 50, 50 or more, and then 0 to 5. So the correct answer is 0 to 5%. So it's very disheartening, right, when we know how beneficial it is for ELLs to engage in these academic conversations, to know that during face-to-face learning, they're only spending 0 to 5%. And it would be interesting to know, what it would be for virtual learning. So then what might speaking and listening activities look like with distance learning? This can be a real challenge to think about that. So one opportunity is short, as I mentioned, short recorded lectures that students can listen to multiple times. So that's a good opportunity for our ELLs to practice their listening and practice that content. Assignments that ask students to record themselves. So there's a lot happening with Flipgrid, I've heard, and other online tools that I'll share later, where students are being asked to record themselves. Having those small group virtual meetings. So again, it's really hard to have a class discussion virtually when you have 25 to 30 students. But when you have a group of 5 to 10, and then students can have an opportunity to get more practice with their speaking. Pair assignments in which students work together remotely. So this could be even something where students are calling each other on the phone to work on an assignment. So again, they're getting that oral language practice, and they're doing it independently. So some other ways, I'm seeing you're already posting in the chat. You guys are way ahead of me. Group them in different rooms, right? Like breakout rooms. So that's a great way to have small group discussions. Screencastify, Google Meets, Seesaw, breakout rooms, Flipgrid, PlayPosit. I haven't heard of that one. Jamboard, nice. So feel free to keep sharing these resources, and I'm going to continue on. So I want to share a couple of activities that you can use to build oral language in your classroom, or opportunities for oral language. And this activity is called Choose the Best Image. And this, we can use, visuals are so great for prompting discussions, and they can be used in a lot of different ways, you know, to build background knowledge throughout a lesson. Or this particular activity is usually at the end of a lesson after you've studied specific content, and you share 4 or 5 different images, and then you ask students individually first and then in groups to discuss which image they feel is most representative of what you've been discussing. Or it could be, if you read a story, which image represents the climax of the story, or a turning point in the story. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is I want you to look at these 4 images, and I want you to share which do you think best represents, is most representative of the US Civil Rights Movement, and why. So in the chat, if you could share A, B, C, or D, which did you choose and why? So again, A is Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. B is an image of desegregating schools. C is Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama. And D is Rosa Parks being arrested. So which do you say? I see a lot of letters. Now, can you go ahead and say, why did you choose that? So I see B, captures a moment in schools. If you could give some reasons. So part of what we want to do when we're having our students talk is make sure that they're providing reasons and rationales for their ideas. A, because it shows success. Nice. Ooh. B, this shows a conflict in motion. B shows reaction of 2 specific groups. Nice. A shows the power of the people. Great. All right, I'm going to keep moving along, and you can feel free to keep adding your opinion. And I want to share a scaffold that you might use. So if you're doing this activity, you could choose to scaffold it for your ELLs, especially your ELLs of lower proficiency levels. So you can see here we have the names of the 4 images, an opportunity for students to first think about which one they would choose and why. So they would complete part 1 individually. Then they work in groups, and they have each person share which image they chose. So again, this is an opportunity for students to make sure they're accountable and they're listening. So they make sure that they've heard each person. And then part 3 is where they decide. So you have the group of students discuss and come up with one that they've chosen as a group to try and reach consensus. So they chose which one because, but we also talked about this one. So this idea that there could be alternative opinions and why. So again, this is the kind of activity that you could adapt. And if you wanted to do something like this online, you could do it in breakout rooms, or you could have images and students have to record themselves saying which one, and then they have to listen to other people's opinions and see if that changes their mind. So there are a lot of different ways an activity like this could be done online. Another activity idea is to have students record a response to a problem or a question, as we talked about, and then thinking about what scaffolds you might use for your ELLs. You could use a checklist. So here you could see, you might have a student answering a math problem and they have to record themselves explaining the process that they use for solving it. And you could provide them a checklist to help them through that process. You'd also want to provide them a model, right? So you could model how you explain a problem that you solved or your rationale for a question, and then have them record that. And again, it could be something that they submit directly to you, or it could be something, if it's more of a discussion, you could post it and they could view one another's. So just some other resources for speaking. In distance learning, many of these that you already mentioned, but Google Meets, voice memos, Flipgrid. Marco Polo is one that can be just done on the phone. So some teachers have described using that as a way to do check-ins with students. that they want to check in about social emotional things, or they just want to have share content. And then also VoiceThread. Some resources for listening and distance learning are Storyline, Audible, Randall's, ESL Cyber Listening Lab, and ListenWise. Is there any other things, any resources that you particularly like for listening or speaking? I see, what is Marco Polo? That's actually an app that you can put on your phone where you can send short videos to people. Zoom recording, ReadWorks. And you will have access to this presentation. We're recording it. I've also shared the PowerPoint on the Padlet, so you can reach out on the Padlet. All right. Great. Now let's talk about some strategies for reading. So 3 strategies I want to talk about are assessing, activating, and building background knowledge, engaging students in close reading and responding to text-dependent questions, and analyzing complex sentences. And again, thank you for all the resources that you're sharing in the chat. We really appreciate that. So it's one benefit or one opportunity from virtual learning is this idea to really assess where students are and individualize instruction. So this includes providing background knowledge to ELLs or other students who might need it. And some ways to assess, activate, and build background knowledge are through title discussions. So this could be during a meeting, or it could be an asynchronous where you provide a title and have students respond to it. Similarly, picture captions, you could post pictures online and have students write captions. Sentence starters, categorize concepts, so you could give students a list of words or concepts and have them sort them. And then they could send you a picture, or they could post online. Short teacher developed text with guiding and supplementary questions. I'm going to show you an example of that. Brief video clips, so we know we're doing a lot more with videos, and we're going to be talking more about that later in the webinar. And then also this home language support, so thinking about how you can provide students with home language support to build their background knowledge. So this is just an example of a teacher-created text for building background knowledge. And you can see here, the teacher felt that some of her students might need more information on President Lincoln before approaching a text, which her non-ELLs would have. So she created a short description, a short text about it with some questions and a glossary and a picture. So these are things that can be created. So the idea is that you could have some of your students building this background knowledge that they need in order to approach a text, and then maybe other students you're providing different types of activity, those students that don't need the background knowledge, that already have that. This is an example of how you could provide an image with sentence stems. So here we see the teacher is beginning to talk about Western expansion. She wants to know what the students know, so she shows the picture and she asks students to complete these sentence stems. This is a picture of, the people in the picture are, something I know about this period is, a question I have is. So in the chat, I'd like you to share what is one way you might use information that you get from an assessment on prior knowledge to differentiate instruction during remote learning. So how could you use, do some kind of formative assessment about prior knowledge and then differentiate your instruction? If you could just take a minute to share some of your ideas. I see to create small groups, right? So you see where students are and then you group them accordingly. Using a KWL, okay. Using vocabulary activities. So you might do some kind of assessment and then give students different vocabulary. That's a great idea. Providing picture support. So knowing, okay, my students need a little bit more area in this, and these are different supports I'm going to do. Great. Use obvious gaps to create videos, right? So you see there's a gap here, and then you create a short video or recorded mini lesson to address that. Ask them to read instructions. I think that's a really important one. I know I have a friend who's a 4th grade teacher, and she was talking about just read the directions, right? So how do we support our students and make sure they're clear on the assignments? Nice, thank you. All right, I'm going to keep going. Feel free to keep sharing your ideas. So the second strategy is engaging students in close reading. And Tim Shanahan, in his text, Letting the Text Take Center Stage, talks about the importance of close reading. So really having students grapple with a short excerpt. Again, we don't want them struggling with a huge text. And when we're thinking about ELLs, we know it's always a balance between providing them at texts that are at their language level, their proficiency level, their lexile level, but at the same time, we also want to challenge them to really grapple with grade level text. So helping students figure out high quality text and focus on reading, interpreting, and evaluating text. Tanya Ward Singer, in her book, ELL Excellence Every Day, provides conversation tasks that we can use to support those close reads. And again, this is something that you could have students in breakout rooms, or you could assign to them to do, where they read a text and then they explore some of these questions. And her 4 steps include: 1, having them anticipate. So we talk about what do we expect to see, what questions do we have, reading to understand, to get the main idea, rereading to analyze and infer, interpret, so taking that, you know, to the next level, and then collaborating to write text, so having students work together to do writing. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit more. I wanted to share with you a great resource. I don't know if any of you have been using it, but commonlit.org. It's a free resource. It has a variety of texts at different lexile levels. So here you can see this one, Diary of a Teenage Refugee. It's at a 5th grade, lexile level 670. And there are a variety of different features, including the text can be read aloud, the text can be translated, there are annotation tools, guiding questions, assessment questions, and you can also, there are also paired text. So maybe you want to talk about a specific theme and you want to assign students different texts to read and then share what did they learn about that topic based on what they read, and to offer alternative perspectives. And there's also a parent guide. So again, building that parent connection, helping parents work with their child to use this resource. Are the passages offered at different reading levels? So that a single passage isn't offered at different levels, but there are different texts on similar topics. And the third strategy I want to talk about is helping students analyze complex sentences. So we really want students, when they encounter a sentence that is confusing, to use it to break it down. So the select sentences should come from a complex text. It should be relevant to the content and skills of the unit. Again, you want the sentence to be connected to what you're studying, contain language functions related to the content and academic task. So again, be very selective about the types of sentences that you choose, contain complex language structure, and contain academic vocabulary or figurative language. So again, choosing these juicy sentences that are really going to help students engage and think about how they can break down those sentences. So we're going to give it a try here. And the way that this works is students will first chunk the text. So you take a sentence, and the sentences that we're going to use is, since most owls feed upon a variety of animals, owl abundance is not limited by the rise and fall in numbers of any one prey species. So first, students will take the juicy sentence and they'll work in groups, they'll chunk it, and then they'll write a summary of each chunk in their own words. And the idea is that they're creating a new sentence, but in their own words, that summarizes exactly what was said in the juicy sentence. And in order to scaffold this, you can begin by modeling it as a whole group. You can also chunk the text yourself and then have them write the summary, but eventually you want to move towards students writing their own summaries. So I'd like to take a minute, and I want you to take this sentence. Since most owls feed upon a variety of animals, owl abundance is not limited by the rise and fall in numbers of any one species. Can you write a summary in your own words of these using the chunking method? So you see Since most owls feed upon, we might summarize that saying, because most owls eat. I'm going to give you just a minute. I know it takes a little time to think through this, but see if you can go ahead and summarize this in your own words. Unpack the juicy sentence. So I see someone said, for a variety of animals, different animals. Because most owls eat different kinds of animals. Nice. Owls eat many different animals. Anything else? Can you try and do the whole sentence? I'll give you just a minute or so to see if you can come up with a new sentence. Ooh, here's some. It's going very fast though. I can't quite get the chat. Owls eat many different kinds of animals. Oh, great. Owl abundance, a lot of owls. Great. All right, I'm going to keep going, but if you want to keep posting your sentence, that would be great. We'll see the different examples. I also wanted to share a tool called Rewordify, and this can help you if you are trying to modify or amplify text. So you want to take a text and you can put the text in here and it will provide the text at a lower lexile level. And we want to be careful because we don't want to be simplifying all texts, but we can use it then to maybe provide amplification. So maybe there's a challenging word and then we provide an embedded definition. So just to help us think about how we can provide modified text for students. And I also wanted to share Sketch, which is a free online tool for annotating screenshots. So if you're working with a text or something, you can then take that and annotate it as you work with students. So that can be a good tool when you're in a meeting with students. All right, next we're going to turn to writing. And we're going to talk about 3 different strategies for supporting ELLs writing during distance learning. And again, as I mentioned, writing, students have a lot more time that they could spend writing. And so those students that need more time can have time to spend on it. You can also spend more time revising. So thinking about how you can support students and really working to develop their writing during this time is a great opportunity. So what scaffolds can we use? How can you use mentor sentences? And how can you have students analyze sequencing and writing? So the types of scaffolds we might use are graphic organizers, word banks, word walls, sentence stems, frames, paragraph frames, modeled writing and collaborative writing, and peer and self-assessment. And I want to show some examples of those. So this is an example of a graphic organizer that was part of a unit that I worked on for a New York City scaffolded lesson in which students were asked to read and compare a speech by Susan B. Anthony and Women's Rights to Vote and The Dollhouse by Henrik Ibsen. So in it, students are asked to pull out and answer what freedom do the two people want and what's the evidence to support that. So this is going to support them then when they're doing their writing. And I'll show you here, this is an example of a paragraph frame. And again, depending on the levels of the students, you want to give appropriate level of support. So lower level ELLs will need more support in terms of frames. You might provide more language in your paragraph or essay frame, but then students at higher levels will need less. Maybe they just need a sentence starter. So you can see included is the writing prompt, vocabulary, which defines words in the writing prompt, and then a paragraph frame that students can use that graphic organizer that I just showed to help them complete. I've also seen teachers provide a whole essay frame in which they provide more support at the beginning of the essay and then less support as students are writing the essay, with the understanding that they're getting in practice, they're developing the skills so that they'll need less support. I don't know if you're familiar with this resource, but this is No Red Ink. They're offering free they do have a paid subscription, but they also have a free subscription, and they're offering more things for free during this time. But this is an online tool that also helps to provide organization for students with their writing. They also have little tutorials on different components of writing that students can watch. So this could be a resource that you might want to check out. And I see someone said, yes, great tool. It's good to hear. You can also have students do collaborative writing, and you can have them color code it so that you know which students wrote which pieces. So this can be a great way for students to get ideas from one another, but you can still identify who did what. And you could do this through like a Google Doc, where two students are working on the same Google Doc virtually, but then they're using different colors and they're creating a single response, a single paragraph, a single essay, depending on what you want them to do. So they're getting ideas from one another, but you're still able to see who wrote what, and further your education or adapt your lessons based on that. The second strategy I want to talk about are mentor sentences. So this is from Anderson and LaRocca. Their book is called Patterns of Power. So their idea is that you show mentor sentences and then you help students to see what they notice about those sentences. So first you would choose a mentor sentence that is focused on a writing skill that you want to work on, a language, specific aspect of language. And then based on that, you develop a focus phrase. So for example, you might provide them with a sentence, and the focus phrase might be, I capitalize titles. And then you would provide them with another sentence, and you ask them to compare, what do they notice? What's similar about those two sentences? Again, both sentences are working on that same skill. And then you ask students to imitate that sentence through interactive or shared writing, through paired writing, and then ultimately through independent writing. Anderson and LaRocca also really emphasize the need to share their writing and celebrate, because often students can be discouraged when they see a lot of red marks on their writing, or they can find it very tedious. So how can we really make writing an empowering process? And then also providing the opportunities for editing. I want to give you just some examples. So here's an example of a mentor sentence. At some point in its life cycle, an insect has 3 parts to its body: the head, the thorax, the abdomen, and 6 jointed legs. So here, the focus might be on using parentheses to enclose clarifying information. And the focus phrase might be, parentheses help me add information efficiently. So again, you want to make sure that your students understand the specific skill they're working on. And you notice that focus phrase is in student-friendly language. If you take a mouse to school, he'll ask for your lunchbox. So this could be on using conjunctions, producing complex sentences, using comma to separate an introductory element from the rest of the sentence. And the focus phrase might be, when I start a sentence with if, I'll probably need a comma. These are just some of their examples. So I want to provide you with a mentor sentence example and see what could be the focus of this mentor sentence. What focus phrase might you use? So here's your sentence. I couldn't wait to see Barry's face when I set him free. Soon we'd be romping through the fields together, just like old times. So what do you think? What might be the focus if you were using that as a mentor sentence? And what focus phrase might you use? If you would go ahead and share that in the chat. I'll give you just a minute to think. So I see apostrophes. Great. Anything else? Any other focus you might use? Writers can show, not tell. Contractions, comma use, contractions. Future tense. Multiple meaning words. Long vowel teams. Dependent clauses. Great, yeah, so it could be used any of those things. Contractions, use of could as past tense for possibility, the use of an adverbial phrase, just like old times. So all those are good examples of how you might use that as a mentor sentence. And I wanted to share an opportunity that you could do in Google Docs. So if you wanted to work on this virtually, you could have a mentor sentence wall where here you see your mentor sentence, you see a focus phrase for the students, and then you have students use write in different examples so they can complete their own sentences. So again, that's something that they talk about in the book, is having a place in your room. In this case, it would be virtually, where you can see all these sentences and you can see how they connect to the mentor sentence. So again, you're helping students practice certain language structures or certain features of language in their own writing. The last strategy for writing that I want to talk about is analyzing sequencing in a text. So for this activity, you would give students sentences on strips, or in this case, you could give them to them virtually, and they have to determine the correct order. So which goes first, second, third. It could also be done with larger text where you have them sort paragraphs. So again, students are using clues to try and determine the order. And the idea being that if they become more aware of clues that writers use in their writing, they will carry those over into their own writing. So we're going to give it a try. I'm going to give you this sample text. It's from The Great Fire. And I'd like you to look at these 4 sentences and decide which one you think comes first. So then you can read through them and put your order in the chat. Which do you think, what is the order, first, second, third, and fourth? And then you can just, for example, just type the number, so it might be 2, 4, 1, 3, or whatever you think it is. You can put in the numbers as the sentences as they're listed. And then also, what are any of the clues that you have? Kind of what gave you the clues? Oh, I see. 3, 1, 4, 2, 2, 3, 1, 4, 2. Great. More general to specific. Nice. Any more reasons? Things, what were the clues that you saw? We'll take just a minute. The date, the year. Date usually comes first, the year, main idea and details, transitional connection. Great. All right, feel free to keep adding. I'm going to go ahead and show you the correct answer. So the order was 2, 4, 1, 3. So again, many of you said we started with the Chicago, the place was a city, and then the city. So we went from a city to the city. And then the other real clue was the description of the building. So in sentence 2, they gave us the numbers and then told us 2/3 of those and then the remaining buildings. So those were some of the clues that we saw. And this text obviously would be very hard for students to do because it doesn't have any of the traditional clues that we think of when we talk about sequencing words like first, next, then. But it's also good for students, once they become more skilled at this, to identify other clues beyond those transition words that we use in our writing to help transition between ideas. So I want to take a second poll now, and I'm going to have you share. Let's see. Go down to this. What is the strategy you would like to try to support ELLs in developing their writing? Sentence stems or frames, paragraph or essay frames, collaborative writing, peer and self-assessment, mentor sentences, analyzing sequencing. I'll take just a minute or two. All right, just another 10 seconds, and then I'm going to wrap up. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So we can see a lot of you said sentence stems or frames, collaborative writing, mentor sentences. Great, thank you very much. All right, and the last domain I want to talk about is viewing. So this is something that's relatively new. We've always talked about the 4 domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, but now we have this aspect of viewing, which is defined as an active process of attending and comprehending visual media, such as television, advertising, images, films, diagrams, symbols, photographs, videos, drama, drawing, sculpture, and paintings. And the idea that students are having an opportunity to view more multimodal texts, and that they gain, that these images enhance the text. And we can also have students create their own multimodal texts. So when we're doing virtual learning, we see a lot more opportunity for students to be engaging in this kind of 5th domain of viewing. So in the chat, if you could just share, why might viewing support ELLs language acquisition? What strategies or tools do you use to engage students in the domain of viewing? I'll just take just a minute or two if you want to share. Why do you think viewing can support language acquisition, and are there any strategies or tools that you use to engage students in the domain of viewing? Note taking, yeah, so that's a great one. So having them take notes as they're viewing something. The idea that it's visual, it's reinforcing learning, building background knowledge, doing a gallery walk, word walls with images. Students find them engaging. Yeah, I think that's a really key piece. Students are more engaged. Watching brain pop videos and having short quizzes. Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to let you feel free to keep adding to the chat. So what do active viewers do? They preview, they prepare to view, they set a purpose for the viewing, and I think that's really important as teachers when we're going to have students view something. How are we preparing for that? How are we sharing the purpose, and what are our expectations that they'll do during the viewing? During the viewing, how are students engaging with the text? How are they seeking and checking their understanding? What kind of interpretation are they making? And then after the viewing, how do we give students an opportunity to respond personally, critically, and creatively to visual text? So some possible scaffolds, and many of these came up as in the chat, is that idea of activating prior knowledge, pre-teaching vocabulary they might need for the viewing, setting the purpose for the viewing. During the viewing, can we model a think aloud? What is the process that we use as we're reflecting on what we're seeing? Providing guiding questions, a word wall, glossary, graphic organizer, in which I know note-taking was mentioned, so using a graphic organizer for students to take notes. And then after viewing, having them work in pairs, using sentence stems or frames to respond to prompts related to what they saw, having a glossary of key terms that they might need, or a word wall, and using that graphic organizer to share their reflections or their analysis of what they saw. You can also build in a routine. So this is from Project Zero out of Harvard University. What do you see? What do you think about what you see? And what does it make you wonder? So thinking about how we might do this virtually, it could be done during a synchronous meeting where you watch something and then discuss it. It could be done where students watch it independently and share their responses in a Google Doc, or they could do a recorded response like we talked about earlier. So make a short recording of them responding to what they saw and reflecting on it. I also want to talk about some ways to use video with ELLs. And this is from Ferlazzo and Simneski. So it could be used for a language experience where you watch video together and describe what you saw. It could be dubbed, so you watch a video with no sound and students write a script. To develop Q&A, you watch something and students write questions and answer questions that they've created for one another. To practice literacy skills of summarizing, predicting, questioning, and evaluating. To prompt critical thinking, to build background knowledge. Are there any other ways you use video with ELLs, or are there video resources that you particularly like? Please go ahead and share those in the chat. That would be greatly appreciated. So when you're selecting videos for ELLs, you want to be sure that they're not too long, because that can be overwhelming. You want to be cognizant of the pace of the speaker. If the speaker speaks too quickly, it might be hard for students to understand. Speakers' use of idioms, slang, or highly technical language, unfamiliar accents. And the possibility for closed captioning or home language translation. So is that a possibility? And again, some supports for ELLs when using video is pre-teaching vocabulary, providing guiding questions or a listening task, so helping them focus, and then a graphic organizer where they might take notes. And I see lots of good ideas coming in the chat. Thank you. So we're just going to wrap up now. So thinking about how you use virtual learning, and we've talked a little bit about this, to differentiate instruction. So analyze formative assessment results, such as a Google form quiz or written response or recorded presentation, and then based on that, sending out differentiated learning tasks with appropriate scaffolds, or inviting small groups to synchronously meet for focused instruction was mentioned, providing differentiated recorded mini lessons. These are all things that were brought up during the session today. Are there any other strategies that we haven't talked about that you're using to differentiate instruction for ELLs and support language development? I'd love to see them in the chat now. I see someone talking about videos can be overwhelming and we need to focus them. Yeah, I think that's really important. Body movement, a parking lot for students to express thoughts and ask questions. I like that. And that can be done virtually. You could have a virtual parking lot where students can place questions or things that they're grappling with. Group research, traffic light, guided reading, Quizlet, virtual trips. Nice, thank you very much. We're gonna go ahead and wrap up. And I'm going to have a little time for questions. So if you want to add any questions to the Q&A, please feel free to do that. Again, our objectives for today were to explore the importance of integrating language instruction into content learning, learn and apply strategies and tools that support ELLs learning in the domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and viewing during online learning, and reflect on how you might integrate these instructional strategies in your context. Again, you'll be receiving a certificate of completion. If you haven't entered your name and the district where you teach, please do so, because that's how they'll be collecting information for the certificates. I'm going to go ahead and see what questions we have. Oh, so someone asked, sometimes when chunking sentences, it seems necessary to reorder the chunks to have them make more sense as you rewrite them. Is this okay? Yes, I think that's totally okay. So sometimes they were writing it. I think the important idea is that you want students to come away with a new sentence. So it shouldn't just be each of those chunked pieces that are summarized but then don't fit together. But if you need to reorder them, that's perfectly fine. Where can we find a recording of this PD? We're going to be sending the recording to the RBERN, and I think my understanding is that it will be distributed to all of you. How would you pair students for the collaborative writing? That's a great question. I think that it can be really, it really depends on your purpose. So for example, do you want to give students an opportunity to have home language discussions first and then do the writing? Do you want to have students, one, kind of be a model, a language model for the other, so you might pair students of different proficiency levels? Do you want to, give an opportunity based on personality of students who you think will work well and collaborate well together? I think that it can vary, and I think it's good to mix it up. So again, the important thing is being intentional about your grouping, thinking, what do I really hope to get out of this? And then mixing it up based on that. Thank you for that question. Can we have access to the chat? We will also be sharing the chat with the RBERN. So I think that will also be shared. My understanding is that will also be shared with the recording. Can I share the Padlet with lead teachers? Yes, definitely. That Padlet remains up. You will have access to it, whenever, and you can share it with whomever you want, definitely. I think, let's see. I think that I answered all of these. Are there any other questions? Any final questions? All right. So I'm happy to answer any more questions. We have about 5 minutes left. If you would like to just share one takeaway that you have or your next steps for developing, for supporting ELLs language development, that would be great. And I also wanted to share that we have 2 future webinars. So tomorrow I'll be giving a webinar at the same time about serving psych through distance learning. And my colleague Marley Zeno is going to be talking about supporting ELLs social emotionally next Monday, also from 9 to 10. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at sydney@getsupported.net, and I'm happy to respond to you. I'll get right back to you. So thank you so much. You've been a really great group. And again, you can access the Padlet. The PowerPoint is shared on the Padlet. We'll be sharing a recording and the chat with the RBERN. And if you have any specific questions, any things you want to ask about any of the activities, please follow up with me. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much.